is the same water coming round. Every day, someone is standing on the edge of this river, staring into time, whispering mistakenly, only here, only now. And so on the walk, we also talked about the university and how it has benefited from being on stolen land. And many acknowledgements by the university don't include Mississippi as part of the land, and it's not recognized as a sovereign being. We talked about bridges, how they separate us from water, yet bring us closer to it as part of our daily routines. We talked about water as a resource, how we use it as a supply to keep us alive and clean every day, how we depend upon water, yet we abuse water. We also talked about our emotions, how Mississippi River has been a place to call home, a place for us to breathe and let out our woes. We talked about how water is sacred to us, and especially the Anishinaabe and Dakota nations, whose creation story takes place at the confluence of Mississippi River and Minnesota River. If anyone would like to share their favorite memory of water, either in the chat, they can, or they can come off mute and share. My favorite memory of water is definitely canoeing and learning how to canoe. And I learned in high school how to flip a canoe back once in case of an accident. So that was my favorite memory that I shared.
Hi, I'm Caspian, and my favorite water memories are anytime I dream of water and also when I connect with the water in my body. Thank you, Miigwech.
This is Michelle. Can you hear me? I'll share what I shared at an event that we had about a month ago, that when I was growing up, we would go to a cabin in South Dakota, and there my dad we'd either go canoeing or my dad would pull us in a tugboat in the lake. And that's what I still remember. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, but that's still my favorite memory of water, being with my dad and my brother on that lake.
I'd like to share a memory. I don't know if it would be one of the happiest memories, but it's one of my favorite memories. And that was after my dad passed away and he wanted to be cremated and he wanted to be in Lake Superior. He used to be a longshoreman or a merchant marine on the big boats. And so we took a trip over to Madeline Island one day with my dad and my family. We went on the dock and then we put my dad in the water, and it was the most brilliant aqua green color that you can imagine. And it just swirled out into, into the sea. And so that was a really good memory. It was a sad memory, but it's one of the ones that's really burnt inside my mind. So my dad's part of the lake now.
I'll share a memory. I really enjoy the water. I grew up canoeing and rafting and stuff like that. And then I joined the military, and I was able and lucky enough to go to Switzerland and go to whitewater raft at Glacier River. And it was really cold. It was really fun. And it showed you the power of water and how it feeds the lakes and how it's just an intrinsic part of who we are. And it was really captivating to try to, or we did, I wouldn't say try, but it's really captivating when a person tries to control that and take that on a boat. And yeah, it's one of my more fonder memories.
Chimigwech for everyone else for sharing their stories. I got to visit India when I was young, and one of my best memories was dancing around in the monsoon rains in the humid of August, and just how, and it was also right by Juhu Beach, which is like Mumbai is right on the shore, and so I remember like going for walks with my parents and eating the street food. And when you stand on the beach and just sink your feet into the sand, the way that the sand just kind of like flows out from underneath is it's a surreal and unforgettable feeling. It's like you're floating. So I just thought I would share that. Thanks.
I have a story with water too, where my dad is actually from England, and when I was little, we used to live there for a couple of years, and we lived by the North Shore, which was really cold, but it was really, really cool to still be able to essentially kind of bear through the really cold water and still try to swim through it. I always remember adamantly still wanting to swim in the river and into the sea, despite how cold it really was. And that's just kind of a fond memory that I have, where water was kind of a way to connect me with my immediate family and then also to my extended family that is now still living in England.
I could share a memory. Miigwech everyone for sharing. I've recently been thinking a lot about how Caspian talks about water in our bodies, and also learning from the chiefess and head of state of the Gullah Geechee Nation, Queen Quet, who talks about the waterways are our bloodlines and the land is our family. And I've been thinking more about the water in my body, and just, I grew up next to Lake Michigan outside of Chicago. And I have so many fond memories of going to the dunes and going to the beach. And I just think more and more about how Lake Michigan really lives inside me, because that was the water that I drank and swam with for, 18 years, the first 18 years of my life. So it's something precious to me with water.
Bonjour, this is Dorene. I would like to share, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I have a very current memory of water. Well, I have many memories of water, but the one that comes to my mind today is I just hugged my granddaughter. Her name is Vivia. She'll be 5 in August, and she was born at home in the water. She was born in a birthing pool. And so soon as she emerged from her mother's body, my daughter's body, our hands gently brought her up closer so that she looked directly at her mother, and my daughter looked directly at her daughter. And she was still underwater, and it was like time, stood still as they looked at each other. And this is before like she took her first breath. And so it was like time stopped, and it was so beautiful to see them engage. Even through that veil of water, they were locked into each other. And then we brought her up, and she did take her first breath, and yeah, very beautiful.
Right, so before we continue on with the rest of our event today, we just wanted to have a brief land acknowledgement for acknowledging the land that we're currently on. And this land acknowledgement statement here that I'll be reading out loud to everybody was provided to us by the Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. So thank you for them for letting us being able to use this statement. We think it's really powerful and really important to kind of talk about this when we're talking about something as crucial and special as water, especially as Mississippi River. So as I read this statement out loud for everybody, feel free to turn off your cameras or close your eyes, whatever is preferred for you. And again, if you have any technology issues or any questions pertaining to that, feel free to ask in the chat or let me know. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started with reading. So, hello everyone. I would like to start by welcoming you to either close your eyes or lower your gaze, while we take a few moments to acknowledge the land that we are on. Wherever you may be, let us acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land. Minnesota is located on the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples, the original stewards of this territory. We are committed to uplifting the name of these lands and the community members from these nations. We acknowledge the trauma that is deeply embedded in the foundation of this country. The land we reside on came under control of the USA through genocide, slavery, and ongoing occupation. We recognize the deep historical, spiritual, and personal trauma that has impacted Indigenous communities, communities of color, and immigrant communities. By offering this acknowledgement of trauma, we affirm the rights of people to bring their whole selves and stories into this space. And we affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and love. So you can feel free to slowly open your eyes, turn back your videos if you'd like. Okay. So now what we can do is just have a very brief introduction to the concept of rights of nature and what that essentially means. So we can go ahead and play this short 2-minute video just to get that introduction.
Hello and welcome to the first official Fast Fact Friday brought to you by the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund and their awesome communications team. Today we're going to be breaking down rights of nature. Environmental degradation is advancing around the world. The United Nations has warned that we're heading towards major planetary catastrophe. For this reason, there is a growing recognition that we must fundamentally change the relationship between humankind and nature. Under the current system of law, hello and welcome to the first official Fast Fact Friday brought to you by the
Let's see. Mike, can you see if your audio is on your either phone or laptop?
I believe it's on.
Okay.
I don't know how I would even check that.
I'm assuming it should be on, I think, too.
Yeah.
Since you can hear me right now, right?
Yeah, I can hear everybody just fine.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we are viewing the shared screen. I think, Graceland, yeah, what we can do is turn on the captions, and we can try to replay the video again and see if it'll work this time. Oops.
Sorry, 1 second.
Hello and welcome to the first official Fast Fact Friday brought to you by the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund and their awesome communications team. Today we're going to be breaking down rights of nature. Environmental degradation is advancing around the world. The United Nations has warned that we're heading towards major planetary catastrophe. For this reason, there is a growing recognition that we must fundamentally change the relationship between humankind and nature. Under the current system of law, nature is considered to be property. When something is considered property, that often gives the property owner the right to damage it. Therefore, those who own these natural communities are largely allowed to use them however they wish, even if that includes destroying it. Rights of nature is honoring and recognizing that nature has the right to exist, flourish, and thrive. Laws recognizing the rights of nature change the status of these ecosystems to being recognized as rights-bearing entities. It means recognizing that ecosystems are living, thriving communities. Now, we're not talking about giving every tree a lawyer. We're talking about creating a guardianship so that ecosystems can be seen in court as more than just a place to stick the next future Superfund site. And this idea isn't new. It's been around for millennia. We see our legal system fail to adjust to the thought of giving ecosystem rights. We see it panic and buckle under the pressure of people-led movements against climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental justice. Those in power are running scared. Rights of nature is a threat to the status quo. It's why local efforts have been preempted and kept off the ballot, and why we must be persistent in pushing back and calling out injustice. At CELDEF, we're working with communities all over the world to amplify not only their voice, but nature's voice. If you want to learn more, head over to celdef.org and reach out. We hear you.
All right. So just as a brief overview from what that video was mentioning, just with rights of nature being just protecting our natural ecosystems, allowing them to basically thrive and flourish and live as they are meant to be, basically left alone from mankind and toxic contamination. So within the brief couple past 30 years, 50 years actually or so, there's a lot of watershed moments of this rights of nature movement that's happening even as current as last year. So within this time span between 1972 and 2003, there were 4 various publications that were being basically publicized to the public that are recognizing the importance of rights of nature. And this includes one being Should Trees Have Standing? Toward Legal Rights for Natural Objects by Christopher Stone. We have The Rights of Nature, A History of Environmental Ethics, written by Roderick Nash. The Origin, Differentiation, and Role of Rights, written by Thomas Berry. And then lastly, we have Wild Law, A Manifesto for Earth Justice, written by Cormac Cullinan and also Thomas Berry. In 2006, Tamaka Borough in Pennsylvania was the first place to recognize rights of nature in law when they actually banned the dumping of toxic sewage into their local waterways. So this is the first example where we're really seeing rights of nature being recognized at the legal level, implementing laws to protect nature. In 2008, Ecuador actually added the Rights of Nature Amendment into their national constitution, being the first country to do so. And then in 2014, we see that the New Zealand Parliament passed the Te Urewera Act, which recognizes a former national park as basically having a legal recognition in its own right, which again is protecting that rights of nature. In 2016, we have the Ho-Chunk Nation becoming the first tribal nation in the United States to vote on a rights of nature amendment. And then in 2016 as well, we have the Grizzly Treaty, which was signed by the United States and Canadian tribal nations, recognizing the grizzly bear's rights to exist in a healthy ecosystem. In 2017, we have the High Court of Uttarakhand in India ruled in favor of recognizing Ganga and Yamuna rivers, glaciers, and other natural waterways as legal persons. Also in 2017, the first US court case system actually occurred where they were defending an ecosystem. And this is evident in the case of Colorado River versus the state of Colorado. In 2018, we then have the White Earth Band adopted a Rights of Manuming law on wild rice, which is the first law given legal rights to a specific plant species. And then in 2019 in Toledo, Ohio, they adopted the first rights of nature's law for a specific ecosystem in the United States, specifically with the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And in 2020, the Lake Erie's rights were defended in federal court, being this is the first time where the rights of a specific ecosystem was actually defended in the US court. And then lastly, again, as recent as last year in 2020, Curitiba in Costa Rica gave citizenship to pollinators and trees and other native plants within that area in Costa Rica. So this movement is definitely still continuing, and it's a global movement as well. It's not happening just in the United States, but all over the world, which is really awesome to see.
Hello, I'm going to talk about Rights of Mississippi River. Our environmental justice student group partnered with Rights of Mississippi River, a grassroots organization working to protect Mississippi. And so their value statement is, we believe that Mississippi River and all communities that depend on her have the right to exist and flourish. We recognize the interdependent relationship between people and our natural environment. Because we are all treaty people, it is all of our responsibility to protect our water and all of nature. The mission of Rights of Mississippi River is to protect Nibi, Mini, or water and all her communities by gaining legal rights for Mississippi River from headwaters to Gulf of Mexico. They approach protecting Mississippi River by growing a base of supporters, building community relationships, educating youth and the public about treaty rights and environmental law, and advocating for environmental justice. Treaty rights, systemic racism, and the responsibility that we all have to steward the earth makes it essential that we work together to make this happen. We envision a Mississippi River community where treaty rights are upheld, water is safe to drink, swim, and use in every way, the Clean Water Act is restored, the Winters Doctrine is honored and upheld, animals, crawlers, four-legged, swimmers, flyers, and all the plants have all the rights to exist and flourish. Humans are reciprocating the gifts of the earth. Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities are not at threat from the health impacts of pipelines and refineries. The rights of Menomin are recognized in legislation. We're all stewards of the earth, protecting water, forests, and all that is sacred. Humans recognize that we are nature, not separate from nature. We leave this world a better place than how we found it. Everyone has clean water to drink and healthy food to eat, and legislation is passed to protect Mississippi River. And you can go to the next slide. If you've noticed, there is no "the" in front of Mississippi River and the name Rights of Mississippi River, because we're trying to use the grammar of animacy, which Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer says challenges the fundamental tenets of Western thinking, that humans alone are possessed of rights, and all the rest of the living world exists for human use. Those whom ancestors called relatives were renamed natural resources. And so we generally use the pronouns of persons used by white settlers, he, she, or they, and we call all other living beings by it. But in Indigenous languages, all living beings are subjects, meaning there is no it for nature. And this language is intentional, as was the suppression of languages by white settlers was also intentional, something Dr. Kimmerer called linguistic imperialism. The word it hides the consequences of our actions and prevents having a closer relationship with our relatives on Earth. And so although saying the Mississippi River and using the does not mean we would treat non-humans with disrespect, that language can reinforce white colonialism and linguistic imperialism. Can you go to the next slide? So now we will commence our soup making and our singing portion of our event. If you live in Minneapolis, your tap water comes from Mississippi River. If you live in St. Paul, it's likely that some of your water is from Mississippi River. But no matter where you reside, the water you use to drink, cook, and clean must originate somewhere on Earth. and in its natural place that water is part of an important ecosystem. As you make soup and sing during this time, we encourage you to reflect on where the water to make your soup comes from, and also the water that went into the creation of the vegetables, the meat, the spices, everything that you're using to cook. And if you're not making soup today, we encourage you to drink water or do a little bit of cleaning or any other activity. And as you do these things, think about what activities you use water for on a daily basis. Think about what water means to you and how different it would be without that life source. And we are so honored today to have Dorene Day with us here, who is a teacher, an advocate, and a healer who wrote the Nibi Song along with her grandson. So we will listen to Dorene as we commence our soup making. Bonjour, Dorene, how are you today? Can you get, oh, there you go.
Bonjour. Thank you for that nice welcome. So I'm sitting here at my kitchen table today with my grandson, Omashkoonce, and I can't see my reflection, so I don't know if you can see us. Oh, here we go. There he is. Yeah, so we're here today. We just had a big family meal, so we're not cooking soup, but we are drinking water, and we're enjoying listening to the beginning of your program. So miigwech for all of the work that you're doing on behalf of the Mississippi River, or for Mississippi River, I should say. I want to start out by saying it's a great honor to be here. I have been praying and singing for the water for many years, and in our Medewan Lodge, it is the women who look after the water, and it is the men who look after the fire. And so without those two powerful and loving elements, we cannot live. There would not be life. And so the work is done in a very respectful and loving way. To be able to pray for the water each day is an honor, and it's a responsibility as well. So I want to go back several years from today to a beautiful woman who now has walked on and has returned to the beautiful place of the Star Nation, and her name was Josephine Mendamen Iban. And she was at a ceremony years ago, probably 30 years ago, and she heard an elder speaking, and he looked around at the vast amount of people who were there, who were listening to him talk. And as he gazed around and asked a question, he said, "What will you do for the water?" And she took that internally in a good way. And she said, I felt like he was asking me directly, what will I do for water? And so she went home to Thunder Bay, where she used to reside, and she thought about that. She thought long and hard about that. And being that she was a Medewanekwe in our lodge, a woman who vows to pray for the water each day, the realization came to her that she could walk for the water. And so it was that she started out from Bad River, where our other guest is from. She started out from Bad River in 2005, that June, right after ceremonies completed. And she walked around the entirety of Lake Superior. And she had made it a point to carry the water in a copper vessel, a copper pail. And she decided that every step would be a prayer. And so as she walked, she spoke our language, and she said a beautiful water prayer. And at that point, the water song had not yet come to myself and my grandson. But also, shortly thereafter, she attended an international water conference where Dr. Yosuri Moto Iban, we say Iban after they have gone back to the source of life, the spirit world, he was there showing his pictures of crystals of water after they had been kind and loved, said loving words, and those that were not, those were the water that was treated unjustly and in a hurtful way. He showed the images of how the water reacted to love and how it reacted to hate. And we met him there. And when it was Josephine's turn to speak at that conference, she said, it's not going to be me speaking. We're going to do a water ceremony for you, with you. And so we were there with other Indigenous and Anishinaabe women, and we proceeded to sing and pray for the water. And then we brought that out to the people, and they had, in a little cup, they had a taste of that water. So it was after that beautiful conference, it was there that I heard the words in English from Yosuri Imoto, and his universal water prayer was, water, we love you, we thank you, we respect you. And that was the basis of his work, was to get people to think and act and treat the water differently. And so we went away from that conference, still doing our work, still praying for the water each day, attending ceremonies and doing that work. And the water walks began. And it was a little bit later, as I would drive my grandson, he was about 8 at the time. I would drive him to school every morning, and we would pass a lake on the left and a lake on the right, which was Tanner's Lake. And then we went over the Mississippi River. And so him and I used to say that water prayer every day. And we would cross the lake on the left, and we would look at it and we'd say, water, we love you, we thank you, we respect you, right from the car. And then we would go on, and then we would see that lake on the right, and we would do that to the lake. And then we would cross the river, and again, we would speak to Mississippi River. Water, we love you, we thank you, we respect you. And then one day, this guy here, tell him what you said.
Well, it's kind of hard to, remember exactly what, what was going on in my head, as I was only about 8 or 7 years old, and I'm 22 now. So it's kind of a long time ago. But, being lucky enough to have a grandma, like as I have in a way of life, as we do, going to ceremonies and, having that a part of my life, and hearing the songs that have been sung, for years, for a long time. And it just, from what I can remember, I just remember thinking like, from that prayer that we would say, we would just say that prayer, we would just kind of talk it, just speak it out like that. And there's kind of, to my understanding as a little boy back then that I was, we kind of had a song for everything, a song for, for like all the stuff you do for all types of different prayers, praying for the fire, for the people, for the food, for the water. We had songs for those, and they has to be treated as prayers. So from that, the water prayer that we used to say every day, I just kind of I was in the passenger seat, just looking out on the water, because that's usually what I'd always do when we'd say the prayers, just look out to the water. And I looked over to my grandma and I was like, Graham, why don't we sing this song? Why do we, because we have songs very similar and for different types of prayers. So that's kind of how, she likes to give me a lot of credit for that, but I didn't really help compose the song. I was only a little boy, so she really deserves most of the credit for that. But as my understanding is, we kind of have songs for a lot of stuff, and songs is also, even back then, it's also a way of helping to not remember, but to not lose things, because catching the melody, hearing the words. So
yes, miigwech. So we had a lot of fun on our journeys to and from school and work. And we always, sometimes we said it really fast. So we wanted to learn it in our language, in the Ojibwe language. And so my daughter had asked her language teacher at Fond du Lac Tribal College to get the closest interpretation of that water. We love you, we thank you, we respect you. So he sent an email back to her and she forwarded it to me, and I cut it out, printed it and cut it out and stuck it in a truck on a Post-it. And then so then we went and we had been saying it in the language. So we were saying, Nebe, Gizage igu, Gimi Gwechawe Nemigu, Gijawe Nemigu. So that in essence is saying, water, we love you, we thank you, we respect you. And so then this young man now, he said to sing it. And I had no concept of a melody. It was just a spur of the moment. And he says, we should just sing that. One day he said that. And so I just opened my mouth and we start singing. And well, I start singing and then he caught on really quickly because he's been a singer for a long time of his life too. And so we sang that song, and the song has never, ever changed. The melody remains the same. And it's like a loving lullaby. It doesn't have a drum or a shaker or anything other than your voice. And him and I have sung it as a round dance to see how that would sound, and it sounds pretty cool that way. But in its original version, it's always been a very slow moving, almost like water, moving outward and slow and beautiful. That's how the song sounds. And so we're gonna sing it. And we'll sing it. Normally when we sing songs, we sing it for however long we feel, or at least for 4 times through. So I'm gonna get another drink of water because I was singing all day yesterday, so my voice is kind of needs a lot of lubrication. So I'm gonna drink some water first. You ready? Okay. So the words are Nebe, Giza ge igu, Gimi Gwecha Wainimigu, Gisha Wainimigu. Yeah, oh, there it is on the thing. Thank you for posting that. Nebe, Giza ge igu, Gimi Gwecha Wainimigu. Gisha Wainimigu. Nibe Giza Geigo Gimi Gwecha Wainimigu. Gisha Wainimigu. Nibe Giza Geigo Gimi Gwecha Wainimigu. Gisha Wainimigu. Nibe Giza Geigo Gimi Gwecha Wainimigu. Gisha Wainimigu. Aho, that is the water song. And I want to share just a couple of things about the song. The song was sung by Heart of the Beast Theater did a play on water probably over 11 years ago. And at that time, they had some Native people involved in the production, and they came with tobacco and asked, can they sing the Nibi Song in the water production? And I said, oh, of course. And I asked my grandson, and he goes, yes. You know, he said, everybody should sing that song. And so it was in a beautiful production there. It's also been sung by some choirs and actually some very large choirs. And I do have somewhere, I have they sent me an MP4 of that being sung by like a 33-person choir. And it's really very beautiful as it's sung in that way as well. In Ottawa, our Anishinaabe, our Indigenous relatives in Canada, often sing that at Parliament in Ottawa when they're speaking out and protesting with their government about land, water, resource extraction, and the fact that they still have, you know, nearly 300 tribal communities or reserves that have a boil water order, you know, and have for some of them for many years, as many as 10 or 20 years. So the water song has crossed the border both ways to Mexico and also to Canada, and is used to fight the good fight. And I appreciate that that it has traveled around the world. A few years ago, I'm a part of a program called the Indigenous, it's Indigenous Youth Ceremonial Mentoring Society, which is led by Mitch Walking Elk in St. Paul. And he took a group of young people, young Indigenous people, to go to talk to the Vatican about the use of the papal bulls and the doctrine of discovery. And we had the chance to go to the Black Sea. And so we did there offer our sema, and we did sing the water song there. So it has been traveling far and wide, and it's a great honor that it has gone to many places. Speaking about Mississippi River, I wanted to share the 2010 Mother Earth Water Walk, and my sister Sharon Day, very staunch water walker, river water walker. She's done many river water walks, and she was leading that walk from the Gulf of Mexico to Lake Superior. And that was, I was on about half of that journey, and I sang that to the water every day as well on that water walk journey to the north. On April 20th or 21st, which was it was the anniversary of the Gulf oil spill the year before, when we put the vessel, the copper vessel, Grandma Josephine put the copper vessel into the Gulf and pulled the water out. There were still oil particles floating very visibly a year later. And we walked with that water all the way to the center of this beautiful Turtle Island, which we consider the Lake Superior as the center. And a beautiful ceremony was done with that water. So I wanted to remember that. And then one last thing I would like to let you know about, which I'm very excited about, is that there is a song coming that was written by troubadour Larry Long, who has been singing to Mississippi River since the 1970s. The name of the song is No More Pipeline Blues, and it's written for Line 3 to help fight Line 3. And it's going to be released on Earth Day, April 22nd. And yours truly has got a little piece of singing on that. And I'm also speaking in Anishinaabe Mawin at the beginning of the song and at the end. So please look for that release of that. It should hit various platforms like, Facebook and Instagram and all of that. But it's a very powerful song, and I can't say any more other than it's coming. Miigwech. Awesome.
Hi, my name's Josh, he, him, his. I met Mike a few weeks ago at a water protectors protest at the state capitol here in St. Paul. And I was honored to talk with him and meet with him and again, trade some information. With that being said, our group, we're so honored to have Mike Forcia here with us this evening. Thank you for your generosity and excitement about speaking at our event. It means a whole lot. And now we're going to turn it over to him. Thank you, Mike.
Miigwech, I'm honored to be here. And it was beautiful listening to Dorene, which it always is. I love her voice. And I love and respect her family, what Sharon's been doing. Her sister Charlene actually made me my medicine bag that I have. So yeah, that was very beautiful. And I thought this was going to be tomorrow. So right now I'm at work. I've been working at the Homeward Bound homeless shelter here in Minneapolis for the last couple of months. And I seen my phone, it said low power mode. So I hope it doesn't go off while I'm in the middle of this. Anyway, my name is Mike Forcia. I'm chairman of the Twin Cities here in Minneapolis. And I'm from Bad River, Wisconsin. And recently I got charged with a felony for taking the Columbus statue down. And the first thing I tell people is actually I didn't. We had some wonderful women who were there. And to me, those are my heroes now. Those women, I made sure they were on the front of the rope, and the men, I put them behind to give them their strength, and that women are true leaders in our communities, and they should be right up front, and especially because of what Columbus stood for. And it was very, very healing, and it was beautiful. But one of the main things that came out of it, and one of the most powerful statements that we could ask for, first did restorative justice, the Native American tradition value. Well, when I found that out, I wanted to turn that into a transformative. And so that's what we did. And at the end of it, after talking with the prosecutor and all these people, they had an acknowledgement. And this is what she acknowledged. As the prosecutor, I acknowledge that the violence, exploitation, and forced assimilation that has been inflicted upon Native people has been perpetrated from colonial times unto modern times, said the Ramsey County Attorney Sarah Corey in a statement to the public. And the trauma resulting from it is still present. The impact of those harms is largely unrecognized and unknown to the dominant culture. She says, I also recognize that the legal process, which I am part of, is reflective of the perspectives of the dominant culture. And what she's saying there is that I got through to them so that they would understand how we feel, and that the mainstream America does not understand that. And I got charged 100 hours community service that I have to teach and educate the public on genocide, on the beginning of this country. And so I couldn't ask for, anything better. And once that is accomplished, they're going to drop all charges. And so one of the things I've been saying to the students that I've been talking to is that when they hear of the pilgrims, the pioneers and the settlers, and how industrious and hardworking they were to come over and create this, the most greatest country in the world, that they must remember that those pilgrims and those pioneers and those settlers, in today's terminology, they would be called extreme white Christian terrorists, because that's what they were. They took that holiest of holy books that they have and they shoved it down the throats of those little bitty Indian kids. And in that book, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. And they used that to lie, steal, and kill their way through genocide and slavery of the African-American race. And so, and I heard that that statue was going to come down in the middle of the night. And so I just could not let that happen. And so I reached out to one of my elders, Mr. Robert Desjardins, and he gave me what for and a good talking to. And so I had two choices. I could either do it or not do it. And there was ramifications for both. But the ramifications for not doing it, I think would have been harder on me than anything that I could have gotten from the prosecutor, which turned out to be wonderful anyway. And so I had my tobacco and I called the governor, lieutenant governor, in the mayor's office at about 9:30 in the morning, told him what was going to happen, invited them down to the ceremony. Although I knew they wouldn't come, but I had to get the message out there because I said he was put up in broad daylight and he was going to come down in broad daylight. None of this under the cover of darkness and to run away. Because if that was going to happen, the headline would have read, Columbus was vandalized in the middle of the night, no suspects, he's being treated, and we're going to put him back up. Couldn't happen. And since we did that, hundreds have came down already, and people in municipalities have purposely taken their statues down. And so I talked to the kids about how the state and the church, how they just took everything they could from us. And here we are today begging for program funds or dollars for this and that. And they're like, nope, you can just have this little bit, but you gotta apply for those grants. You gotta, almost beg for it. And so I go on and I talk about how I give credit to George Floyd because of what happened to him. And this kind of started this whole ball rolling. And I give credit to George Floyd for the Washington Redskins changing their name and the Cleveland Indians. Because we, with our protests, we might have changed hearts and minds, but Dan Snyder, it was the money. That's what does it, is the money. And so I give George Floyd credit for that. And I'm working with some people to try to change Columbus Avenue into Little Crow Avenue. And so I spend a lot of time talking about that, but what I always bring it back to is that these things that we talk about, Christopher Columbus and the Washington Redskins and all these things, and they said, don't you have anything better to worry about? We always hear that. Yes, we do. We do have other bigger things to worry about. Because in the grand scheme of things, the Columbus statue, those are so minute and tiny. And I always bring it back to what is important, and that to me is the seven fires prophecy and what we are doing to this planet. And that every day that goes by, we are missing a plant or an animal that was here yesterday that is no longer here. And that we get all of our food and our medicine and our clothing and our housing and everything we need, we get from the plants and the animals. And once they're gone, we are going to be doomed. But if we perish from the planet, the plants and animals would thrive. And so I talk about capitalism, materialism, and the water. I always end up at the water and how important it is to, and how, sure, the Columbus thing, it brings people together to talk. And that's what it was meant to do, because it is a big deal, but when we're talking about the life of the planet, it really isn't. The Washington Redskins is not a big deal when you're talking about in 10 years, 350. That's what the magic number is 350. And they're saying in 10, 12 years that what are we going to do? And so I tried to make this example that if you took a field mouse and you put him in with a lab rat or a little white lab mouse, that field mouse isn't going to know what to do. He's not going to know which buttons to push for the food or the water, and he's not going to know. And similarly, if you took the white lab mouse and put him out in the field with the field mouse, well, he's going to die. He's not going to make it out there. And so that's what they did to us. They took us from, I suppose you could say, the Garden of Eden that we were placed in. And then they said, you can't leave this spot. You think your creator created something special? Wait till you see what we create. And then they opened the floodgates and said, this is it. And we have our own people look at the skyline of Minneapolis and St. Paul and say, isn't that beautiful? Isn't it lovely? Look at the lights. But they don't understand, if you stood on the banks of the Mississippi River at the bluffs where the mountains are, and you look out over the river, you would see so many little fires going because of all the encampments, all the villages. And that is what was beautiful. That is what is missing. That is our monument. The river is a monument to us. And so it's going to be hard to get that message across, but it's working. Everywhere I've spoken, it's been nothing but positive. It's been nothing but positive. And so, like I said, yeah, we're going to do the Redskins and the Columbus thing and all these other things, but the message always has to come back to the seven fires prophecy. It always has to come back to the water. So when I talk to the kids, I say, right now, line 3, Winona LaDuke and so many other people are up there. I said, sure, he might have canceled one pipeline, but the Dakota access is still there. That's what we have to talk about. And I tell them that the genocide, people think the genocide was from this time to this time, when in fact it started, but it has never finished. For us, that genocide has not stopped. And while the greater society is out with their family, going to movies and dinner and picnicking and this, here we are, walking around the Mississippi River, walking the length and breadth of the river in the Great Lakes, protesting, tearing down statues, we're out there doing these things while they're out there enjoying the benefits. And so what I always tell them too is that we are not here to say to the white people, we are here to blame you. Because you were not here, you didn't do anything. I wasn't here and it didn't happen to me. So you have nothing to feel guilty of. And we talk about land back. We're not saying we want to take your house. We want to take your land. But you know what they could do? They could give back those mounds to the Dakota and take the swing sets and slides and the park off of it and turn it into the ceremonial ground it was. They could give PV Park, Powderhorn Park, even Theo Worth Park back to the natives. Just think what we could do with that as far as our homeless goes. Can you imagine if the governor in the state gave back the Chippewa National Forest, what we could do with that? So there are things we can, work on together, but we're not here to say you did it. We're here to blame you. We're here to say this is what happened. And that the red, black, the yellow, and the white, that is our sacred colors. That's the color of the human rainbow. We have to unite against white supremacy and racism. All of us, every one of us. And for the Anishinaabe, there's not many of us left. We are very few. And most of us have been infected by that when those little kids got that book shoved down their throat. That was the greatest victory America has over Native Americans, because not only did they get those kids, when they grew up, they got their children, their grandchildren, and to this day, we still have people, I got to get my kid baptized, I got to get my kid. So I don't blame them, but we've lost them. And so there is very few of us, very few. That's why we need the red and the white and the black and the yellow to unite, because we need to do this together, you know? And so I guess that is my point that I want to make is, for me, it always comes back to the prophets of the seven fires and how we're at that turning point right now. We have to pick which road we're going to be on. And are we so far down that road that we can't make a U-turn and come back and go back down this road? Or are we at the Y? Are we at that spot? And for a long time, I was worried. I was so worried and depressed. But then a couple of years ago, I kind of turned around and I see these young people. And I see these young people coming up. And I think, you know what? I think we're okay. If we can help them, and when the time comes, back up and get out of their way so they can lead us through this, because there's going to be some catastrophes coming. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to join together. And, you know, this purification that the seven fires prophecy talks about, it isn't going to be pretty. There's going to be a lot of people perish, and then they say that the ocean will rise and mountains will fall. And so I think we are at the cusp of that at that time right now. And so I'm using what I have to, you know, like I said, to get people's attention. But once we have their attention, and we can talk things that seem almost trivial compared to, you know, the water and to the rice and to the walleye and the continued genocide that has to be stopped. You know, that's important to me. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mike. I had to get up for a second. That was a very powerful, powerful speech. Thank you, and we really appreciated you speaking here. Okay. So my name's Josh again. He, him, his pronouns. Wonderful, wonderful presentation so far. I would like to give a wonderful and a big thank you to everyone who's spoken. So what is line 3? Line 3 is it's a big black snake that runs from Canada to Superior, Wisconsin. Enbridge pipeline. It's going to carry tar sand from Hardisty, Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin in the United States. Line 3 is a massive pipeline project. It's being built and owned by Enbridge, which carries tar sands crude oil, which is produced from the Suncor Energy open pit mine operation near Fort McMurray in northern Alberta. And to give you a scale of how large this operation is, you can actually see it from space, from satellite imagery. It's a huge scar in the land. It is extremely taxing to the environment around it, all for the thirst for oil. This line is going to pass through 300 miles of so-called northern Minnesota, which most of the land is the Anishinaabes tribe sovereign territory. It's going to cross the headwaters of the Mississippi. It is going to threaten many, many lakes in the area, as well as potentially contaminate the groundwater underneath. The old Line 3 is damaged and has been running at a fraction of its original intended capacity. So therefore, Enbridge and Suncor and many investors come up with the idea to put in another one. They used it because, you know, it's improperly installed and materials in it are made, they're degrading. It was built in 1968, which a lot has changed since then. The new Line 3 is a so-called replacement project by Enbridge and advertised as necessary for safety. If this pipeline succeeds in being built, it will carry 800,000 barrels of tar sands crude oil per day along its 1,031 mile length. Even so, it is not a replacement project, as the new, bigger line will be passing through an entirely new corridor in Minnesota, with the plan being to abandon the old Line 3, which would leave nearly 90% of it in the ground, which leaves a potential for further corrosion, as well as increasing the possibility for residual oil seepage into the surrounding water tables. It is extremely degrading to the environment, and it needs to be stopped. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, so Line 3 does a lot of harm. It does a lot more harm than just to water. It does harm to Indigenous peoples and treaty peoples. So tribes along the route have not consented, and therefore the state of Minnesota is impeding on those Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination and self-government. They also have the usufructuary rights given to Indigenous people, which is the right to make a modest living from land. And these rights are contained within the treaties of 1842, 1854, and 1855. Building this pipeline will also decimate historic and sacred sites. Water users will also be affected by Line 3. Any pollutants in the water by Line 3 will be carried around the state and enter potable fishing and recreational waters. So anyone uses any lakes or rivers in so-called Minnesota for any purpose should be concerned about this risk. Line 3 will also affect ecosystems. The diverse ecosystems of lakes and rivers will be threatened by leaks and leaching of the line, not to mention the disruption during construction, since tar sand pipelines do have the largest oil spills. All of the land has already been clear cut for the placement of this line, which has already disrupted the essential forest ecosystems. Another thing that will be affected by Line 3 is manumin, which is wild rice and a sacred food to Indigenous people. It is economically, nutritionally, and culturally important to the Anishinaabe. When the Anishinaabe migrated here from the east, they were guided by prophecies that instructed them to go where the food grows on the water. The route would impact 389 acres of wild rice in 17 different bodies of water. And then finally, water bodies and tributaries and people and nature around the world will all be affected by Line 3. Tar sand pipelines pollute the land and bodies of water that they pass through, but the pollution doesn't stop there. The climate impact of the tar sands being transported by the pipeline is enormous. The pipeline would move so much carbon that it would equal the building of 50 new coal power plants. The social cost of carbon is estimated to be $287 billion. It is also important to remember that climate change disproportionately affects marginalized communities globally, and the emissions of greenhouse gases is not a local issue, and it will affect everyone. So line 3 crosses the Mississippi headwaters twice, in addition to many of her tributaries, so other streams and bodies of water that are connected. Notice how line 3 crosses a region with many of Minnesota's cleanest lakes. The red line is the current line, or is the line 3 route, and the dark blue cleanest, and the light blue is the next cleanest, and the red is the dirtiest in these areas. The largest inland oil spill was a result of line 3, and it occurred in Grand Rapids, Minnesota on March 3rd, 1991. It spilled 1,680,000 gallons of crude oil onto the land and into water. 30 Enbridge spills from their various projects have resulted in the contamination of water, 17 of which were groundwater resources. And many will argue that a new line is safer than continuing to use the old line, as it will be better at preventing spills and leaks, but evidence shows otherwise. 46 Enbridge spills were from equipment that was less than 10 years old. Construction of the pipeline will disrupt aquatic ecosystems and the ecosystems nearby that are deeply connected to the health of the aquatic systems. And Mississippi River has the right to thrive and be protected from harms like pipelines, both because of the impacts of construction and the high likelihood for spills. Okay, and now we're going to join our breakout rooms. These are the questions that we would like you to consider and reflect upon and then discuss. I will put them in the chat so that everyone can see them while they're also in breakout rooms. And if anyone has anything that they'd like to share from their discussions, you can feel free to add that into the chat, or if you would like to share out loud.
I can just share one thing. This is Hannah Jo, she or they. One thing that we just started to talk about as it was getting cut off was Josh was talking a lot about, you know, using smell and sight and all these different senses to kind of understand how land and water are doing and different areas that are polluted and, you know, oil spills. And it just made me think about, you know, using our senses to both tell, I don't know, I was just telling this story and this is like a half-formed thought, but hearing the frogs that are out right now. And I was in an area where, you know, they were in a little pond, but there was also garbage in the pond. And so just kind of trying to see like, what are my senses telling me about this? Both that, you know, this garbage shouldn't be here and we should, you know, be taking better care of land and water. And at the same time, you know, the frogs are still thriving and, you know, the water, they're still making a home in this water. So just trying to think about the resilience of nature and how, you know, the healing is possible, I think. Miigwech.
One thing our group talked a bit about, as well as something we talked about on the walk yesterday, was that in the city, especially, it can be hard to listen to the water because you can't hear it flowing. Even as we were standing in East River Flats Park, which is right up next to Mississippi River on U of M's East Bank campus, you still can't hear the water flowing. And the only time we could hear it was when the crew team went by in their boat, and you could hear them paddling the water. And something that really struck me, I don't remember who shared this, but you used to be able to hear St. Anthony Falls from miles away. And now we're pretty close to St. Anthony Falls on the U of M campus and we can't hear it at all. So those are just some thoughts.
One thought that was shared in the breakout room I was in was one way to give back to the land and water is to is that using as only what we need and to not waste, to appreciate the fact that water is a gift, and that we depend on Mississippi for so many things, and so to be very careful with how we use water from Mississippi shows our respect. And then also, because we are humans and can't make our own food, to try and give back to land and water by planting and cleaning up the environment, picking up garbage where we see it, and just doing what parts we can. And it doesn't even take bending over backwards, but just to be cognizant and aware, and then to respond to what we see.
I also shared in the breakout room about how rituals really support me to unlearn learned helplessness, and just remind myself I can do a ritual sometime, and that always includes connecting with nature in some way through like the moon or trees, plants, water, and just really showing up for what offers us such unconditional love, and really seeing nature as medicine and as teachers and as relatives has been really meaningful. Miigwech, thank you.
In the group I was in, we talked about quite a few things. The positive aspects of it was like, I don't remember who said it. It was actually Joe who was talking about planting seeds for the spring plants, and being in connection with that, and that's always the positive outlook on nature. And like Hannah Jo mentioned was, despite all this stuff that happens and all the toxicities and stuff, there's always new growth after a wildfire. Nature prevails despite human interaction to stop, and clear cut, and whatnot. So nature's more of a glass half full, and I believe human beings are more of a pessimistic outlook on nature and the general scheme of it. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for sharing. We want to recognize that we are approaching 6 p.m. If you need to leave right at 6, we totally understand. Amy just dropped some links in the chat to some upcoming events that we will be talking about in a couple minutes here. But thank you all so much. We will move on. So some ways to plug in and get stay up to date on what's going on the front lines. There are some Instagram accounts and Facebook pages listed here that you can follow. And of course, join the Rights of Mississippi River group on Facebook. If someone else could drop all of these in the chat, that would be awesome. As I have the slides up, I can't get to it right now. But the GNU Collective was started by Tara Hauska, an incredible leader, Indigenous leader and water protector, who's been very outspoken in the fight against Line 3. We have Northfield against Line 3, which is mostly run by students and community members in Northfield. Then we have Stop the Money Pipeline, which is working on the front to get banks and corporations to take their money out of funding Line 3 and other pipelines like Dakota Access Pipeline. Resist Line 3 is pretty self-explanatory, working to stop Line 3. MM350 is a awesome group organization that has been is doing some work on Line 3, but also more broadly does a lot of climate justice work. Camp McGeezy is one of the camps on the front lines. They go live when they are having actions. And so you'll get to see, they go live on Facebook, so you'll get to see what happens on the front lines if you aren't able to make it up there. And then Honor the Earth is an Indigenous led organization that has been doing a lot of work against Line 3. Now, we are going to ask that you, if you have not already, signed the petition to tell Biden to stop Line 3. Siobhan just dropped the link in the chat, so if you could go to that quickly and sign that petition, that would be awesome. I'm sure many of you have already signed it, but as you probably know, Biden stopped the Keystone XL pipeline and recently said that he was not going to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, but is still yet to say anything on Line 3. And so we are urging him to, and his administration, to stop it because they have the power to do so. And Tim Walz, our governor, has clearly showed that he is not going to use his power to stop the pipeline. So thank you for taking that time. And finally, we have some upcoming events. If you want to learn more about Line 3, we have 2 virtual events. ABCs of Line 3 is put on by MN350. Super awesome. This is on Tuesday evening. We have a teach-in to stop Line 3 put on by Fossil Free Mac, which is a student group at McAllister College. And they are going to teach about Line 3 and its harms. That's on Wednesday evening. Then we have Mother Earth Day, which is being put on by Honor the Earth, and I think some other organizations as well. That is on the 22nd of April in the evening and is virtual. And then we have 2 in-person events that are a little bit further out. Stop Line 3 X Earth Day for Future Generations is being put on by an awesome student group at UMD called MPIRG. They do some great work. And so they're putting on an event up in Duluth at one of the parks there on the 24th of April. And then for May Day, there's an event at the Welcome Water Protectors Center in Palisade, Minnesota. And that's an all-day thing on the 9th of May. So these are just a few of the ways that you can get plugged in. As I said on the last couple slides, following those other organizations and groups will also give you the opportunity to see upcoming events. And I would encourage all of you to stay up to date on what's going on and participate in some way, whether you can go up north or you can do some virtual stuff. All people and all abilities during a pandemic are necessary and welcome. And that is all that we have for everyone today. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you coming to build this community space. And I'll leave some room for other people from my group who want to say a few words before we head out.
Yeah, thank you everybody so much for offering your time for us today, this evening. Talk about really great things, our connections with water, how to resist Line 3, and specifically talking about Mississippi River and hopefully we learned, some new things today about rights of nature, how the movement is, ongoing and it's being recognized on a global scale. It's really exciting to see all y'all getting involved. And it's been great discussions as well, talking about our discussion questions. So yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank everybody.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, students.
Thank you all. This was so wonderful. Thanks for the space.